He called her sweetheart, good girl, right there in open court, his voice dripping with condescension. Judge Arthur Harrison, powerful, respected, and rotten to the core, saw his court reporter, Clara, as insignificant. Just a quiet woman typing in the corner, easily dismissed, easily overlooked. He thought she was just part of the furniture, someone to patronize while he wielded his power. He was dangerously wrong, because while Clara dutifully recorded every word of the official proceedings, she was also secretly documenting his crimes. His constant sexist remarks were just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath his charismatic facade lay a hidden web of corruption, of backroom deals, bribes, and justice denied. And Clara, the quiet woman he belittled daily, wasn't just a court reporter. She was leading a double life, working undercover for the FBI, meticulously gathering the evidence to expose his every dirty secret. He thought she was just a sweetheart. He had no idea she was the key to his destruction, the architect of his downfall. This is the incredible story of her quiet courage and the shocking moment his empire of deceit came crashing down around him. The courthouse stood as a symbol of justice, its imposing columns and polished marble floors meant to inspire respect for the law. But within its walls, in the specific courtroom presided over by Judge Arthur Harrison, respect often felt like a one-way street. Judge Harrison was a man who commanded attention. He was handsome, articulate, and possessed a certain charm that had served him well throughout his career, propelling him to a position of significant influence. He was known for his sharp legal mind, but also for his towering ego and his unshakable belief in his own superiority. His courtroom was his kingdom, and he ruled it with absolute authority, his word often treated as law itself. Sitting just below the judge's imposing bench, almost hidden from view, was Clara Bellweather. Day in and day out, she sat at her stenotype machine, her fingers flying across the keys, capturing every word uttered in the courtroom. She was the picture of quiet efficiency, dressed professionally but modestly, her expression often hidden behind a curtain of concentration as she focused intently on her work. To Judge Harrison, and indeed to most of the lawyers and spectators who passed through the room, Clara was practically invisible. She was the court reporter, a necessary functionary, but hardly someone worthy of notice. She was quiet, unassuming, just there. But Clara Bellweather held a secret far more significant than any legal argument presented before the judge. Her quiet demeanor wasn't just shyness or meekness. It was a meticulously crafted disguise. Her presence in that courtroom wasn't just about recording testimony. It was about gathering intelligence. For Clara was not merely a court reporter. She was an undercover operative for the FBI, placed strategically in Judge Harrison's courtroom to investigate swirling rumors of deep-seated corruption, bribery, and obstruction of justice that had clung to the judge for years, yet remained frustratingly unproven. Harrison saw an insignificant employee. The FBI saw their best chance to finally expose him. Working in Judge Harrison's courtroom was a masterclass in enduring casual cruelty, especially for women. His sexism wasn't always overt shouting, but a constant grating undercurrent of condescension. He would often interrupt female attorneys mid-argument, a patronizing smile playing on his lips. Now, settle down, counsel, he might say. No need to get emotional. Let the men handle the complex arguments. He'd wink at the male lawyers, fostering an old boys club atmosphere right there on the bench. Clara, however, bore the brunt of his daily dismissiveness. Because she was quiet, because she was always there, he seemed to see her as his personal punching bag for patronizing remarks. "Sweetheart," he'd call across the courtroom, snapping his fingers. "Can you read that last part back? Try to keep up this time, will you?" If she performed her job flawlessly, which she always did, he might offer a sickeningly sweet, "Good girl, Clara. Make sure you get that down correctly for the record," as if praising a child for completing a simple task. Each sweetheart, each good girl, felt like a tiny needle prick. Clara would feel a flash of heat rise in her cheeks, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. She kept her eyes fixed on her machine, her fingers never faltering. She couldn't afford to react, couldn't afford to draw attention to herself. She channeled the humiliation, the simmering anger, into laser focus. He thought he was putting her in her place, but he was actually strengthening her resolve. Every condescending remark was another reason to bring him down. While Harrison saw only a meek reporter, Clara saw everything. Her position gave her an unparalleled view of the courtroom's inner workings, beyond the official record. She saw the subtle patterns emerge, how certain defense attorneys, particularly one named Slick Rick Davison, seemed to have an uncanny ability to win impossible cases before Harrison. How the judge would inexplicably dismiss crucial evidence when Davison was arguing, citing obscure technicalities. How Harrison would hold suspiciously long, private meetings in his chambers with Davison or his wealthy clients during recesses, meetings that were never officially logged. Clara noticed the coded language, the shared glances, the easy familiarity between the judge and certain individuals that hinted at relationships extending far beyond the courtroom. She saw how his rulings often seemed predetermined, regardless of the evidence presented, especially in cases involving large sums of money or powerful defendants represented by his favored lawyers. The rumors of bribery and fixed cases weren't just rumors. Clara was witnessing the playbook unfold right before her eyes, day after day. Her quiet presence, the very thing Harrison mocked, made her the perfect observer, gathering the threads of his corruption while he remained blissfully unaware. Clara's life became a delicate balancing act. By day, she was the unassuming court reporter, meticulously transcribing testimony, enduring Judge Harrison's patronizing remarks with practiced calm. But by night, and during every stolen moment in between, she was Agent Bellweather, an undercover operative meticulously building a case against a powerful and dangerous man. Her job provided the perfect cover. Court reporters have access to a wealth of information: official transcripts, evidence logs, court schedules, even draft rulings left carelessly on desks. Under the guise of organizing files or preparing daily summaries, Clara made discreet copies of suspicious documents. She noted discrepancies in evidence handling, logged patterns in Harrison's rulings that defied legal logic, and documented every instance of potentially inappropriate contact between the judge and specific lawyers or defendants. Technology became her silent ally. The FBI had equipped her with state-of-the-art, virtually undetectable surveillance gear. A simple-looking pen left accidentally on the conference table during meetings in Harrison's chambers contained a high-fidelity microphone. A brooch pinned to her blouse housed a micro-camera, capturing fleeting moments. A suspicious handshake, a document passed discreetly. A worried glance exchanged between co-conspirators. She learned to activate these devices with imperceptible movements, her heart pounding each time, knowing discovery meant not just the end of the investigation, but potentially grave personal danger. The information she gathered was relayed to her FBI handler, Agent Miller, through carefully orchestrated clandestine meetings. They never met near the courthouse. Instead, they'd rendezvous in crowded coffee shops, blend into the background on park benches, or exchange briefcases during a staged accidental bump on a busy street corner. These meetings were short, tense, and conducted with extreme caution. "This is good, Clara," Agent Miller would whisper, quickly reviewing the latest intel, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Very good. The patterns are undeniable. But you need to be careful. We're hearing whispers that Harrison feels the heat. He doesn't know where it's coming from, but he's getting paranoid. He might start watching everyone more closely." Clara understood the risks. Judge Harrison was not just corrupt, he was powerful, with connections that ran deep within the city's legal and political circles. If he suspected her, if her cover was blown, the consequences could be severe. He could destroy her career, discredit her evidence, and potentially even arrange for her silence through less conventional means. Yet, the thought of letting him continue to pervert justice, to mock the very system she was sworn to uphold, both as a reporter and an agent, fueled her determination. "I know the risks, Miller," she'd reply, her voice low but steady. "But we're close. We just need something solid, something undeniable, the final piece." She knew that circumstantial evidence and documented patterns weren't enough to bring down a sitting judge. She needed irrefutable proof, a smoking gun, and she was willing to stay in the lion's den until she got it, no matter how dangerous it became. The linchpin of the FBI's investigation became the ongoing corporate fraud trial involving Rexford Holdings, a massive conglomerate accused of widespread financial manipulation. The CEO, Arthur Rexford, was a personal friend of Judge Harrison, and his defense attorney was none other than Rick Davison, the slick lawyer Clara had long suspected of colluding with the judge. The prosecution, led by a determined assistant district attorney named Isabella Rossi, had built a mountain of evidence, incriminating emails, damning financial records, and testimony from whistleblowers. Yet, from the moment the trial began in his courtroom, Judge Harrison seemed intent on systematically dismantling the prosecution's case. He sustained nearly every objection Davison made, no matter how flimsy. He limited Rossi's time for questioning key witnesses, often cutting her off mid-sentence. His bias was becoming increasingly blatant, raising eyebrows even among seasoned court observers, though none dared to challenge the powerful judge directly. The breaking point came during a crucial phase of the trial. ADA Rossi was presenting explosive financial documents, clear evidence of Rexford's direct involvement in the fraud. Davison objected, citing a complex and highly questionable procedural technicality. Any impartial judge would have likely overruled it immediately. But Harrison leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face, pretending to consider the argument. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "Objection sustained," he declared, his voice ringing with false authority. "The documents are inadmissible." A gasp went through the courtroom. Rossi was livid. "Your Honor, this evidence is absolutely critical," she protested, her voice trembling with outrage. "It directly proves the defendant's guilt. On what possible grounds are you excluding it?" Judge Harrison fixed her with a cold stare. "My grounds are that I am the judge, counsel," he said smugly. "My ruling stands. Objection sustained. Move on, or I'll hold you in contempt." Rossi, defeated and furious, had no choice but to comply. Clara, watching from her station, felt her blood run cold. This wasn't just bias, it was blatant obstruction of justice. She knew, instinctively, that something bigger was at play. During the next court recess, Clara's instincts screamed at her. She saw Judge Harrison retreat quickly into his private chambers, closing the door firmly behind him. Acting on a hunch, she subtly activated the recording device in the pen she always kept clipped to her notepad. Making a plausible excuse about needing to clarify a previous ruling for the transcript, she knocked lightly on his chamber door. He waved her in impatiently, already on his personal cell phone, his back turned to her. Clara pretended to search for a file on his desk, positioning the pen strategically while Harrison spoke in hushed tones. His voice was low, but the microphone was sensitive. Yes, the payment was received this morning," Harrison muttered into the phone. His eyes darted toward the door, but he seemed satisfied Clara was busy with the files. "Consider the key evidence buried. We're on track for a dismissal by Friday, just as we discussed. Rexford sends his regards." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The smoking gun, confirmation of the bribe, the conspiracy, everything. She subtly retrieved the pen, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. As she turned to leave, Harrison ended his call and glanced at her, his usual condescending smirk returning. "Ah, Clara," he said, oblivious to the bomb she now carried. "Still here, sweetheart? Don't worry your pretty little head about all this complicated legal stuff. Just make sure the transcript is perfect, all right?" Clara simply nodded, her expression carefully neutral. "Yes, Your Honor," she replied softly, clutching the pen that held his downfall. She walked out of his chambers, her mind already racing, planning her next move. The end was finally in sight. The next morning, an air of tense finality hung over Judge Harrison's courtroom. The Rexford Holdings fraud trial was scheduled to continue, with many anticipating a swift, judge-directed conclusion favoring the defense. Judge Harrison entered with his usual confident swagger, taking his seat behind the imposing bench. He surveyed the room, a king overseeing his domain, completely unaware that his reign was mere moments from ending. Clara was already at her station, her fingers poised over the stenotype keys, her outward appearance perfectly calm, betraying none of the turmoil or anticipation raging within her. "All right, let's get this over with," Harrison announced, shuffling some papers. He glanced towards Clara, a habitual smirk playing on his lips. "Clara, sweetheart, make sure you're ready to capture my brilliance for posterity." A few sycophantic chuckles rippled through the defense side of the room. Just as Ada Rossi stood up to make a final, likely futile, motion, the main courtroom doors burst open with startling force. Heads snapped around, Standing framed in the doorway were several figures in dark suits, their expressions grim and determined. Leading them was Agent Miller, Clara's FBI handler, holding up his badge for all to see. "Arthur Harrison!" Agent Miller's voice boomed, cutting through the stunned silence. "You are under arrest for bribery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and obstruction of justice." Chaos erupted. Spectators gasped. Lawyers jumped to their feet, whispering furiously. The court officers moved instinctively, unsure whether to intervene or stand down. The defendant, Rexford, looked utterly bewildered, his face paling rapidly. Judge Harrison shot up from his seat, his face contorted in disbelief and rage. "What is the meaning of this?" he roared, his voice cracking. "Arrest? On whose authority? This is outrageous. You have no jurisdiction in my courtroom." He slammed his hand on the bench, trying to assert the dominance that was rapidly slipping away. Agent Miller strode purposefully towards the bench, unflinching, holding up a thick warrant. "We have every authority, Judge," he stated firmly. "We have warrants, sworn affidavits, and substantial evidence gathered over months, including," he added, his voice dropping slightly but carrying clearly through the tense room, "recordings of your incriminating conversations." The word recordings hit Harrison like a physical blow. His bluster momentarily faltered, replaced by a flicker of pure panic. His eyes darted wildly around the courtroom, searching for an explanation, a scapegoat, anything. He looked at Rick Davison, who seemed just as stunned. He looked at Rexford, who now looked terrified. And then, his desperate gaze landed on Clara. She wasn't looking down at her machine anymore. She was looking directly at him. Her expression wasn't triumphant or smug. It was simply calm, steady, and unwavering. There was no fear, no deference, just the quiet strength of someone who knew the truth. In that instant, the puzzle pieces clicked into place in Harrison's mind with horrifying clarity. The quiet reporter, the constant presence, the seemingly insignificant sweetheart he had dismissed and belittled countless times. She was the source. She was the reason. The realization struck him with the force of a physical betrayal, far more potent than the handcuffs now being snapped onto his wrists by the approaching agents. The smugness, the arrogance, the charm, it all vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated fury mixed with the dawning horror of utter defeat. He opened his mouth, perhaps to scream at her, to curse her, but no sound came out. He was being led away, stripped of his robes, his power, his dignity, defeated by the very person he had considered beneath his notice. Justice, quiet and meticulous, had finally caught up with Judge Arthur Harrison. The arrest of Judge Arthur Harrison in his own courtroom sent shockwaves through the city's legal and political circles. News outlets ran frantic headlines, detailing the stunning downfall of the once powerful judge. The story dominated conversations, revealing the deep-seated corruption that had festered within the halls of justice, hidden behind a facade of respectability. The Rexford Holdings fraud trial was immediately declared a mistrial. With the presiding judge arrested for taking bribes related to the case, the entire proceeding was irrevocably tainted. Federal prosecutors began the arduous process of rebuilding the case, determined to ensure that Arthur Rexford and his co-conspirators would eventually face legitimate justice. Furthermore, the exposure of Harrison's corruption cast a long shadow over his entire judicial career. A special committee was formed to review hundreds, potentially thousands of his past rulings, searching for patterns of bias or evidence of other fixed cases. It was a long and complex process, but it was a necessary step towards restoring public faith in the integrity of the courts. And what of Clara Bellweather? Her undercover role concluded with Harrison's arrest. Though her identity as the operative was kept confidential by the FBI to protect her safety and future career, whispers circulated about the quiet court reporter who had played a pivotal role. She became a quiet legend within the Bureau, a testament to the power of meticulous work and unwavering courage under pressure. Agent Miller ensured she received the commendations she deserved, recognizing the immense personal risk she had undertaken. Clara eventually moved on, leaving the courthouse behind, perhaps pursuing a different path within law enforcement, or returning to a quieter life, forever changed by her experience. Her story, however, serves as a powerful reminder. It reminds us that corruption can hide in plain sight, even behind a judge's robes and a charming smile. It reminds us that sexism and condescension are often tools used by those who feel entitled and above reproach. Most importantly, it reminds us never to underestimate the quiet ones. Sometimes the people who seem the most insignificant, the ones dismissed as sweetheart or good girl, possess the greatest strength, the sharpest eyes, and the unwavering integrity needed to bring the powerful to their knees. Justice doesn't always announce itself with a loud bang. Sometimes it works silently, diligently, until the moment is right to expose the truth. Please remember to share, like, and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to turn on post notifications to be among the first to watch our videos. See you in the next video.